Kai Humphries' show Gallivanting comes to the Glee Club on the 29th, which is Tuesday. And
Yeah.
here is Kai Humphries right now. Hello, Kai.
Hello, mate. Yeah, it's very soon. It's just round the corner, that one. Everything's happening fast now the tour has started.
How's the tour been going?
Oh, it's been great. I've done most of the gigs down in the south now, like done Bristol, Bath, London, Chelmsford, which is in Exeter, Brighton. But I live in Glasgow, and there was a 4 day break in between the first batch of gigs and then the second batch, and I come home in between, so I've been spending a lot of time in the car. The Hobbit on audiobook, to answer your next question. I'm preempting it. Andy Serkis reads it out, and he's the voice of Smeagol, Gollum. So his voice acting's incredible. So it's a good audiobook.
I imagine it's quite long as well.
Yeah, because this is what I've realized. I've obviously seen and read Lord of the Rings many times, and then I'm currently watching Ring of Power, and I realized there's a gap in my lore. I hadn't read or watched any of the Hobbit stuff, so I was like, oh, I've actually got some Lord of the Rings that I haven't seen or heard.
Is that why you scheduled the tour to be like it is
Oh,
with the
yeah,
long
yeah, it was,
drives?
it was perfect. It was perfectly planned for Tolkien's works.
And I suppose in a weird way, your sort of tour is a bit like Frodo going on a quest,
Yeah,
isn't it?
I mean, I am gallivanting. Yeah, I've got I've got my bindle. I've got all my hat on at a jaunty angle. Yeah, I've got yeah, it is. I guess my Sam Gamgee would be Elliot Steele in this case because he's been opening for me. So
How does he feel about that?
I mean, he doesn't know yet, but he fits the bill really well.
So your show is gallivanting. What kind of thing can people expect from it?
So I started writing the show as like a collection of stories from my travels because I was like, I've got this unique experience if I've been to many places in the world, despite being from a small town. So I've got like the working class small town lens on the world as I'm saying it. So I just wanted to put this collection of anecdotes together. But then it's ended up being like a kind of more of a journey into my mind and where I've getting an education from my travel and how my worldview's expanded because of like immersing myself in other cultures and stuff. So it's a little bit more soul searching as well as searching for adventure.
What other cultures have you been?
Spent a lot of time in India. I spent there, so there's this large portion of the show about that, and there's also a portion about my wife is from a Muslim family, so I've married into her family, and I've spent quite a bit of time in the Middle East, so I explore that quite a bit, and also talk about our travels to Russia. We did some gigs in Russia in like 2019, and I had a guest living in our house from the Ukraine, so I kind of tie a bit of immersion into her life and my time in Russia into the travel stories as well.
So you mentioned you being from a small town. Tell us a little bit about where you grew up.
So I grew up in Blythe, which is it's a nice community. It's a small mining community on the northeast of Newcastle, like a satellite town. But ever since before I was born, the mines have been closed, so it's been a little bit like hard up, like it's suffered with austerity. So it's had like a lot of work done on it since I grew up in Blythe. It used to be a little bit rough around the edges, but now the beach has been done up and there's a bit more civic pride in Blythe than there was when I lived there. It's come on quite a bit in recent years, to be fair to it. But it was the little like growing up on a council estate in the 80s and the 90s. So I do also touch on that in my show as well.
While you were growing up there, did you always have this yearning to travel and see the world?
Yeah, well, I remember the word gallivanting being a bad word because it would be said with a frown. It would be like, where have you been? You've been out gallivanting because you've just been wandering around with the streets with your friends in pursuit of adventure. And then I looked up gallivanting and that's what it said. It was like the pursuit of adventure without responsibilities. And I'm like, well, that's the goal. It said it about right, but that's the goal. Like the responsibilities are actually quite burdensome when it comes to your sense of adventure. So I do talk a lot in the show as well about the balance between responsibilities. I just mentioned to you before the thing started. I've got my little dog that's scratching at the door for a walk. That's something that keeps me tethered to the house in moments when I'd probably be off wandering otherwise. My wife runs a business, so that's it. We don't have children, and I talk about that, about how children can affect your life and the sacrifices you have to make if you want to have a family. Um, so yeah, I guess like life is always that balance between your sense of adventure and the responsibilities that you have, which when I was a child and I was getting told off for gallivanting, that's only because I had school in the morning, which in itself was a responsibility.
Yeah, it's a weird thing, isn't it? Using "oh, look at him gallivanting over there" as an
Uh-huh.
insult. That kind of
Yeah.
that is. I don't know whether that's a particularly British thing that
Well, it should be
we.
said with jealousy if someone's
Yeah,
gallivanting.
yeah. It
You
should be
you should
like,
be one. You should
"Hey,
be one to do that.
that guy's gallivanting."
Aye. How can I
We
do
should.
that? When I look back and I think like I used to think it was my parents that were stopping me from adventuring because they were telling me to come in. I had a bedtime or whatever. The bath was run, or my brother had left the bath water in because I grew up in a certain generation. And um, and then when I look back, I'm like, oh, I was the burden on them. They would have probably been out gallivanting if it wasn't for the fact they had to have that child that's roaming the streets in bed so that he's not too tired for the teachers at school the next day. I guess when I look back and thought they were holding me back, it was actually the other way around.
So, is your show? Would you say your show is about escaping?
But I wouldn't say escaping as such because you're not getting away. I mean, you are getting away from the house, but you're not escaping it. I also like touch on the homesickness you can sometimes get if you spend extended periods of time away and you miss your home comforts. And if you're away from your wife and your dog or your kids, if you have them, then that can pull on you as well. So it's about finding the balance rather than escaping.
Okay, where's the worst place you've been?
Oh, that's tricky. It's probably in the UK.
Yeah, probably.
It's gonna sound really cliched, but Sunderland.
And you're here in Birmingham doing the show. Do you have any memories of doing shows in Birmingham, gigging here?
Yeah, I do because the Glee Club, which is gonna be the venue where I'm performing my solo show. That's one of the first professional clubs that give me a chance. They had me on to do a tryout spot, and you obviously you drive down. Well, I was in Newcastle at the time, but it's still a long way from Newcastle. Um, I live in Glasgow now, just for reference. So I remember like going down to do my tryout spot, and you're doing it as a hobby. You're putting your own fuel in the car. You're taking your own time off work just so that you can do this like 5 minute spot, and you don't know if it's going to go well or not. And then they give me a full weekend of gigs in the I think it was the September of 2010. So I hadn't quite quit my job yet, and I was getting a full professional weekend with them. And I remember being quite nervous because I didn't feel like I was ready for it yet. I did well on a five spot, 5 minutes, but then I was booked for 20. But then in between getting the gig and doing the gig, I'd done the Edinburgh Fringe Festival where I did an hour every day, and it was my first time doing like a full 1 hour show. So by the time I got to Birmingham, I felt like a professional. I didn't feel like I was just an imposter. So I feel like Birmingham is like probably the first city that I like really cut my teeth as a professional. So it's nice to come back with a tour show and do a show there.
It's the first city that saw your genius.
Yeah, they recognized me. They saw the potential and unlocked it. That was Birmingham with a midway of my professional career.